Hi guys, amazing to be here. Thanks very much. Didn't quite realize there were going to be these Pokeballs spread throughout the place, but thanks very much. I think there are some seats down here that are free for people at the back. Right, well, I'm from a company called Scape Technologies. But before I start, I'd like you to cast your eyes back to last year, when a little-known application came onto the market. And in the very first month, this application generated over $200 million in revenue. The company that owned the application went up in value by $23 billion. And for those who used it more than they used Facebook, Twitter, Google Maps, Snapchat, Tinder, in fact, as well. I'm not going to belay the point. The company and the application that I'm talking about is, of course, Pokemon Go. And since its release last year, it's become an absolute phenomenon. The CEO of Niantic, the creators behind Pokemon Go, told me that at one point in the early stages of Pokemon Go, the application was generating more queries than Google search, which is just absolutely phenomenal, okay? It's really not being talked enough. Now, for those that aren't familiar, I'm sure most of you are, in the application, Pokemon can be found in physical locations around the world, ready to be captured by users with their mobile phone. And obviously, this represents not just a new type of gaming, but a new way to use computers to interact with the world. We're going to see augmented reality being used for medical use cases, to visualize the body in new ways. We're going to be seeing it be used by engineers to rapidly prototype new ideas and see those new ideas come to life around them. It's going to be used by engineers to fix machines that they've never even seen before. You know, in time, augmented reality will be used by each and every one of us to replace the mobile phones in our pockets and the computers on our desk. But before that happens, there are a number of challenges that we have to push through before that vision of the future can become a reality. So I thought it might be fun just to have a look at some of those challenges, some of those barriers that we're inevitably going to have to push past. Now, the first challenge that we have is the way we actually interact with this content. With Pokemon Go right now, the application, you hold out your mobile phone, and this mobile phone then acts as this window into the augmented world. But it doesn't quite live up to our expectations of what we really want. We don't just want to look through a window, we want to step through and be entirely intertwined with this augmented world. And to do that, we need to have a virtual reality headset. Now, although we're seeing headsets like the HoloLens and the ODG glasses and things like that right now, augmented reality headsets aren't necessarily new. Let me show you a video from several years ago. Have a look at this.
So we know exactly where I am and what I'm looking at. So when we do this, we can then augment the real world, which I am in now, with the virtual world. So this Pac-Man world, I'm seeing it as part of the real world. I can see cookies in front of me, and I'm walking through them as if I'm the human Pac-Man. So what we're aiming for is that we're taking the human Pac-Man and bringing it into more mobile devices. Within 2 years, we'll be able to see full commercial human Pac-Man type games on the mobile phones.
Now, they said within 2 years. That was about just under 10 years ago, so I think they were a little bit off with that. But we might laugh at that video right now, but if you compare that with the pictures we saw of Pokemon Go, with people running around parks, actually, that's pretty spot on with what people were doing. I dropped by the Museum of Computing, which is just around the corner from here, last time I was in San Francisco, and saw the very first augmented reality headset, the Sword of Damocles by Ivan Sutherland. This was created in the 1960s, okay? So this has a long history behind it. But we are, of course, in the very early stages of these head-mounted displays. It seems like we're in the early stages of computing where you had these heavy power packs that you had to carry around. We want something which is portable, we want something which is lightweight, we want something which we can wear all day long. So it needs to be portable. What else? These devices also need to be sociable. You know, one of the greatest things about Pokemon Go is the demonstration of bringing people together, making people feel close. And unfortunately, that's an element that augmented reality has failed us in the past. When we look at things like Google Glass, you remember the term people had for people who wore Google Glass, these glass holes. Unfortunately, instead of bringing people together, it had the unnatural effect of creating this barrier between people who had them and people do not. Luckily, however, we're starting to see these devices which can be worn around, which can feel sociable, like the Snapchat spectacles which we saw recently, which, although they're obviously not an augmented reality headset right now, they're paving out that path. So, portability, being sociable, what else? We need computer recognition. We need object recognition of scenes to be able to understand the scenes around you in the same way that humans do. We're starting to see applications like Blipper. We don't need the sound for this. We're starting to see applications
Have you ever seen a
Blipper.
flower?
They're able to recognize objects within a scene and to be able to give you information based on what that camera is showing you. That's using something called neural networks to be able to perform this object recognition and be more useful to you. But in addition to being able to recognize objects, we're also going to need the ability to recognize scenery, to be able to recognize where we are. Because unless we have a very precise understanding of exactly where we are in the world and in which direction we're orientated, the digital content won't match up with reality. And this problem of figuring out where we are is a tricky one. In the past, with Pokemon Go, we've used GPS to figure out roughly where these users are in space. So you can say there is a Pokemon broadly within this block radius. But for augmented reality, for true augmented reality, where we can pinpoint something, a digital piece of content against the real world, this just isn't accurate enough. In the past, we've used visual markers, visual fiducial markers as they're known, that are able to augment the content. So this could be for augmenting a chocolate bar or a cereal box. But these just haven't really lived up to our expectations again. I'll show you another video that was created using fiducial markers about 10 years ago. Have a look at this.
I'm Brian, and today I will become Optimus Prime.
This is going to be the best video you see all week. This goes on for about 5 minutes, so I'll move past. We don't want this, right? We want to we want to augment the world as we have in our imaginations. We want to be able to overlay rich digital experiences onto the physical world. And that's what we're doing at my company, Scape Technologies. This problem of figuring out precisely where you are is a bit of a chicken and egg scenario. How can you figure out where you are without a map of the environment? And how can you build a map of the environment without having a knowledge of where you are? Now, in robotics, this has been challenged with, or solved with, something called odometry. Odometry is the use of sensors to measure change in location. Now, the easiest way to think of this is wheel odometry, where every time you have a wheel click round, if you know the circumference of that wheel, you can therefore infer the distance that you've traveled. This is wheel odometry. Now, this is what they used in the early Mars rovers. So they figure out if you have a full turn of this wheel, you can figure out where this rover now is. But they quickly realized that this wheel odometry wasn't enough. You didn't just need to do this with wheel sensors. You needed to do this visually. You needed visual odometry. And one version of this visual odometry is something you've probably already heard of, SLAM, simultaneous localization and mapping. This has been around for several years. Let me show you one early video. This was in 1993. Let me correct myself, 1993. Have a look at this. So this is monoslam, one of the very earliest forms of monoscopic single-camera slam. Now, this is many, many years ago. It's taken so long to get where we were in this academic phase right now to where we are today, when we can use things like Snapchat filters. And it's because that algorithm you saw right there is very computationally expensive. It's taken over 10 years to get to the point where we can have experiences like this, that we're familiar with Snapchat, where we overlay digital experiences, digital content onto the physical world. Now, although Snapchat shows this very effectively, there are still limitations to its approach. Because it's only using a single camera and has no prior knowledge of the scene, it's a little bit like wheel odometry when you don't know the circumference of the wheel. It can measure your relative position, the movements that you move, but it doesn't have any prior information about that scene. It doesn't have any idea of scale. And additionally, every time you're using this, it's like you're mapping an area from scratch. The best way I can make an example of this is a game called Command & Conquer, which some of you may be familiar with. In this computer game, you start off at an entirely blank map. And as you move your characters around, you start to uncover this map, right? Right now with augmented reality, this is the state of the system. This is how people work. It's a little bit like everyone's working in their own little silos, building up these maps on their own, which means that if one person goes to a map, first of all, there's no cooperation between them. What you really want is something like this, something like where everybody is both pulling from and contributing to the same digital map. It will give you an inherent understanding, an inherent memory of the areas that everybody visits. And again, this is what we're doing at Scape Technologies. The way we do this is we build this map online. We build it on a server. Can we play this video? I might need to go backwards and forwards to see if it will work. There we go. Okay, so this is a point cloud that sits on a server that we can use as a ground truth for what the world looks like. We can query this map with any mobile device in order to compare what we see with our camera with what we know to be true, which sits on the cloud. This means that every time people go back to that location, they have this shared memory. They've already mapped out this environment, and they can use that to explore the digital environment. Now, there's a little demonstration I can show here of one area outside our office block, where we map out the outside of our office. We know precisely where we are because we can have this communication with a server. And because we know that, we can see the same content from different locations. We can tightly couple digital content with physical locations outside and on a massive scale. And we'll see a little video of what this looks like in the game engine. So we actually have this dense map that we can use to build these scenarios around. Now, I mentioned this is large scale. We've seen before in the past map building on true city scale sizes. So this is a point cloud from Dubrovnik, which was captured using crowdsourced imagery just from people's cameras that were uploaded to Flickr. Now, when people upload these images to Flickr with the express permission that they can be used in the Creative Commons, we can crowdsource all this together to gain a better understanding of what the world looks like and how it's structured. We can then use that map to precisely determine where users are within that space, so that there isn't a Pokemon floating within a block's radius. You can have a digital piece of content that is aligned precisely in the world where it should be. So, how can we use this? Up until this point, the majority of AR content has relied on overlaying 2D content like pictures and videos onto the 3D world. This is because up until this point, the ability to generate 3D models has been limited to people with familiar understanding of complex software engineering. But when we're seeing things like Tilt Brush, this VR application where you can put on a headset and draw and sculpt and shape in 3D space with the same ease of using a pen and paper, suddenly you're realizing that this is the ability to generate 3D content for AR like never before. We can then take these models that people create in Google Tilt Brush and export these into the AR world. That's something I think is really, truly exciting. So, we can't do this without you. We need people that can go out there, take this technology, and use it to experiment, collaborate, explore, and work together to make this vision of the future come to reality. So to conclude, what does Pokemon Go look like in the future? I always say that if you want to understand what's happening in the future, all you've got to do is have a look at Arthur C. Clarke, the author, who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I say that if technology allows us to be magicians, then AR and VR will allow us to be gods. Once the world around you is this digital canvas, the question that remains is, what will you create? Thank you very much.
We have 1 minute for questions.
Sure.
There's one back there.
Hey.
Quick question. How much coverage do you have?
So we've got London. We've got several miles of coverage within central London right now. We'll have central London completely covered by the end of the summer, and we can work with individuals. We're working with a few theme parks right now who can have a given space that they can then map out and add to that server. Cool. Thank you very much.